Episode 2 of the JLCognito podcast, brought to you by Cognito Motorsports. Got Mallory here with me. I'm Justin Lambert. Thanks for joining us. Last week, we talked about some helping customers hold dealers accountable in securing a value-to-value transaction. And we had a couple dealer horror stories, but we want to make the point that there's a lot of great dealers out there. There's a lot of guys that they're really passionate about this industry, trucks, wheels, tires, things like that. Just think about SEMA. The past 5-6 years, we didn't even build our own SEMA trucks. I mean, who did we have building trucks?
Customers and dealers.
So tons of people, tons of dealers that do know what they're doing out there. So we don't want to discount that. Can they make mistakes? Yes, we're human. We all can make mistakes. It happens. But we're not going to hold anybody's reputation accountable on making a simple mistake. But it doesn't mean that we don't all work to raise our standards. And that's kind of what I'm coining today's podcast is raise your standards. And several ways people can do that. But ultimately, high standards coming from a business, ultimately they're going to bring a better customer experience. And a better customer experience is going to create loyalty from that customer. They're going to spread the word. And that loyalty is going to turn into more customers for that company. Now, there is a bunch of great dealers out there that kind of have it going on and got good standards. They're leading their team, their sales team, stuff like that. We need more of that in this industry. You know what I mean? So I think if we've got dealers or installers and the customers listening to this podcast, I think we can maybe help shed some light and maybe give some tools to help these dealers kind of step it up, because I think I have pretty high standards, but that doesn't mean I'm not always evaluating my standards, because I'm in this business and we're in these buildings because of our team and the standard that we've held. And it doesn't mean we're always perfect. You know, I mean, on the daily, there's little things that happen. I mean, again, we're all human, but we need to continually evaluate our standards. Businesses can do that by, specifically in our arena, someone who is a dealer and an installer of Cognito products, let's say, they can become more knowledgeable about a product and service, and that is working on raising their standards. So if they've got a customer calling in or coming by and customer wants something done to their vehicle, let's say leveling it, like we talked about last episode, what do you think the first thing that customer is going to ask when he walks in the door? Hey, I just bought a 2500 HD, Mallory. I want to put a little bigger tire on it. I don't like the stock rake. What should I do?
Right. The first question I think is always, how can I achieve this certain look, right? Everybody wants to achieve a certain look or a certain wheel and tire fitment. And I think our first question is, well, what do you do with the vehicle, right? That should always be the first question.
And how does it need to serve you?
Yep, exactly.
Okay. And the good thing about leveling kits, which that's what most people are interested in, is it's pretty low commitment, meaning there's not a ton of, you don't have to cut up the truck and stuff like that. But also you're not jacking the thing way up in the air. So if they're coming in asking for, hey, I just want to level it out because I don't like the stock rake, you know, that's their problem, is they don't like the stock rake. So how can we solve it? I'm going to say that some dealers might take the easy route and they might go, oh yeah, we can just put this brand XYZ. It's, you know, it's $400 installed and we'll have you out of here in 3 or 4 hours. But that really is probably the easy route. Okay, that's the quick sell, get you in, get you out. Don't really want to know about what you're doing. Don't really, you know, move on to the next guy. And I think that's where some salespeople take the more sales approach when they probably should learn a little bit more about their customer, so their customer feels like they're being taken care of, not just sold.
Right.
So if I'm a new customer and I'm walking into a shop and, hey, I want to level my truck out, I think the appropriate way, what would you think the appropriate way to sell the proper level of a leveling kit, meaning monetary value, because you've got, I would say, economy, good, better, best.
Right.
So how would you go about finding out what that customer, what their budget is?
Right. I always like to lead with what kind of daily driving do you do with the vehicle? So is this like I hate to use this term, but is it a pavement princess? Do you just daily drive it? Do you tow on a regular basis? Just the small things to figure out what the purpose is of them buying that vehicle. I like to also, what kind of budget are we looking at? Do you have high mileage? Is it brand new? Do you want to get the use out of your factory shocks before you just go ripping them off of there? I always try to kind of figure out what they're looking for as far as performance-wise out of the vehicle, because these trucks aren't cheap. They're very expensive. So
Right.
You want to get the full use out of whatever you intended to buy it for.
Right. And we have the benefit because we're a manufacturer, at Cognito Motorsports. If someone's calling us, they're looking for Cognito Motorsports
Right.
product. Now, if a customer with a new truck is walking into XYZ off-road shop and they go, hey, I want to level my truck, I don't like the rake, then it's up to that dealer or installer or counterman to kind of do their job and go, okay, well, did you have your mindset on anything? Do you have a budget? What truck did you buy?
Right.
Oh, I bought a 2024 Denali Ultimate. Well, you probably can assume because they just spent $104,000 on a Denali HD Ultimate that they're probably not looking for the cheapest leveling kit out there.
Right.
You would say.
Right.
So off the bat, I think that the way I would tackle that is go, okay, sir, I see you got an HD Denali Ultimate. We definitely don't want to sacrifice any ride quality, right? No, sir, I don't. I want it to ride good. And I heard that you're not supposed to crank torsion keys because that makes them ride bad. Well, this is where the dealer needs to be knowledgeable, because the poor torsion bar key, it's not his fault, okay? It's not his fault that he gets cranked up and creates a bad ride, because really he didn't create a bad ride, okay? We explained this before, and what torsion keys do, all they're doing is sort of resetting the baseline for a torsion bar key adjustment, okay? And when you're turning up torsion bars, whether it's a stock torsion key or an aftermarket torsion key, you're raising the ride height. So you're replacing droop travel with ride height. So I brought a couple props here. Hopefully you guys are watching. If you're not, get over to YouTube and take a look. But I brought a couple of torsion bar keys to show you what they do here, okay? So I'm going to try and explain this the best for people who aren't watching but just listening. So I've got a stock torsion bar key here. And the shape of this thing, I mean, they've been called torsion bar keys forever, but you've got a hex at one end, and then you've got kind of a lever at the other end. And an aftermarket torsion bar key is just reclocking the hex, very simply. So if you're watching YouTube right now, this is an aftermarket key. This is the stock torsion key. I'm going to set the aftermarket key next to the stock one, and I'm going to line up the hex, okay? The difference is the lever is about an inch different out here. That will raise the height of the truck because you're sort of setting the preload in a new spot, okay? But if that's all you did is change torsion keys and you didn't put a longer shock and say a Cognito upper control arm in the truck or something like that, yeah, you're going to run out of droop travel because you just used it all up in ride height. It's going to ride like crap. So the key here, no pun intended, torsion key here,
That was a dad joke.
is to not just throw torsion keys in it, because that's not going to really do anything. Honestly, the torsion bar adjuster bolt, I mean, if you have enough bolt there, you really can just crank the bolt up and get the same effect that this key is, okay? The thing is what we're doing here at Cognito with a leveling system is providing the right length shock, an upper control arm that can accommodate the extra droop travel that upper shock that shock is allowing, and so we're basically adding a bunch of droop travel. Well, now we want to convert some of that droop travel into ride height,
Right.
and you're getting the ride height out of the torsion bar key or turning up the torsion bars. It's the same thing, whether you turn up the stock torsion bar key or you put an aftermarket torsion key in there. It's the same. It's doing the same thing.
Right.
Okay. What people seem to mistake is they think adding the control arm gave them lift. And it doesn't.
Or the shocks. A lot of times because the 1500s, you have your coilovers, but even on 2500s, we get a lot that people think the shock is what gives them the lift height.
Right. So, folks, it isn't. I mean, if you've got a newer 8-lug truck, GM truck, it's got torsion bar suspension. And just to be clear, a torsion bar is a spring. A coil spring is a spring as well. They're both doing the same thing. They're putting a bar in a torsional strain. And anywho, the torsion key is where we're getting our ride height. We're going to convert some of that ride height into droop trap. Pardon me. The torsion key is where we're getting the ride height. The longer shock and the upper control arm is where we are gaining the ability to have droop travel. Now, just because we added 3 inches of droop travel and the truck had 3 inches of droop travel stock, that means I can get 6 inches out of this thing, right? 3 plus 3 is 6. Isn't that right? No. But we've seen it happen.
Yep.
Right?
I'd like to add too that with the factory keys, you typically have a problem with the bolt kind of walking against the key and snapping. And with our key, because of the little divot in them, it doesn't do that as well.
Yeah, so if you're watching YouTube, I'll flip these keys over and you'll see the torsion bar adjuster bolt rides right here in this little area at the end of that lever. And if you can see it, there is a divot right here where we kind of capture that bolt. It seems like everybody's doing that now. I started doing that years ago. But all good. It's just a little safety thing. Yeah, all in all, folks, you still need 3 inches of droop travel. The truck has to ride good. You just bought a nice new truck. Don't kill it by cranking a 3-inch leveling kit up to 5 or 6 inches. That's not the way to do it. The right way to do it if you're looking for that height is you need a lift kit. Okay, so the poor torsion keys, it's not their fault. It's not their fault. Kind of some of the other stuff we see is some shops that may not spend the time to recommend the right wheel and tire. They may have a little bit of rubbing, or maybe even a tire that is recommended but says, hey, trimming is required. That doesn't mean, hey, you got to cut your bumper and your cab and all that stuff to fit this tire. It just means, hey, that carpeted hard paper or plastic inner fender liner just needs trimmed. But over and over, it seems like we see dealers or installers that, the tire's rubbing, we got to crank it up some more. And they don't bother trimming.
Right.
You can't just keep cranking the front end up because the tires rub. And then the poor customer comes along and, they drive their truck out of there and like, wow, this ended up a lot taller than I thought. Like I saw this picture online on Cognito's website and it's right here. And they're like, oh, well, your tires were rubbing. This is what you wanted. So we had to go up. So again, doing your homework and doing a little bit of trimming and maybe making sure you're using the proper width wheel, the proper diameter tire, the proper offset wheel, that's super important. And I know, how many times have you seen, people call in and go, oh, yeah, I've got this issue and I've broken up her ball joint. And what do? You ask them to what? Send pictures in, right?
Yep, every time. I think a common misconception is that when you add our control arms and you already have your torsion keys adjusted up, that the control arms are going to compensate for additional ball joint adjustment or that they're going to be longer rather than them. Yes, it is going to be a little bit different than factory, and they are much stronger than factory, but they're not there to give you more adjustment for over-adjusting your torsion keys, right? You still have to install correctly. They just help. They're there to help. They're not there to fix an over-adjustment.
That's right. And, a lot of times when that person sends those pictures in that we've requested, what do we see?
Over-adjustment or incorrect installation.
What about wheel and tire?
Always a lot bigger. Not always. I'll say most.
A lot of times. We're seeing guys putting 14-inch wide wheels, with 35-inch tires on a leveling kit. I don't know how they can turn the truck.
A lot of them can't.
It's got to rub badly. And, I mean, it looks cool, and that's the look they like and all that. And that's great. But unfortunately, the average consumer who's maybe seeing this stuff on social media thinks that that's okay. And oh yeah, I like that look too. That's what I want to do. But they don't realize what they're getting into.
Right.
And, then you got a broken ball joint because they beat the living heck out of it because they have no droop travel. So you're just constantly beating up the shock and the ball joints.
Right.
And that stuff just isn't going to live that long in that fashion. So that's big problems, especially with a customer that doesn't really know what they got into, and they went to a dealer and said, "Hey, this is what I want." And the dealer just is looking for work, so they just did it.
Yeah.
And
without educating.
Yeah, that usually never leads to a good outcome.
Or they'll just, I think sometimes a lot of Band-Aid solutions is to put a longer shock on there. If they're getting a bad ride quality, they're like, oh, maybe the shock is too short. And so then they'll put a little bit longer of a shock, and we run into the same issues. Yeah,
and then they're binding up the upper ball joint and prying it out of its housing, and you can't do that. What we're doing, I mean, we didn't create a Cognito leveling kit package to limit the use of available travel or performance in that truck. I mean, we tried to get everything we could out of it. And so really, dealers and customers, you need to follow our recommended guidelines. I mean, we're doing that for a reason.
Right.
And we're not interested in just slinging steel here. Like, we're building parts, we coin ingenuity, quality, and performance. Our system is providing performance. We've done our homework. We're not just copying somebody else's stuff and getting it out there. I think we're an innovator, really, I would say. And a lot of people come along and do the same thing. I mean, we've actually have some dealers that actually copy our product and build it. It's okay. I mean, everybody's got to try. And props to those guys. I mean, they definitely filled some holes during the COVID thing where we were really backed up. So props to them. But customers and dealers, remember, looks versus cost versus function. You really got to find out and get down into what your customer is really looking for, so you can really do them a service by providing them what they need. I got a story about torsion keys at SEMA. Okay, this is a good one. Now, look, these things all come from Taiwan, China, stuff like that. Almost all torsion keys are imported. Okay, that's really no secret. There was a company, and I'm not going to name names. I mean, I want to, but I'm not going to name names.
It's probably a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, but anyway, so I'm at, and I'll back up a little bit. So before SEMA, I mean, we have our torsion key product. Everybody's got their torsion key product in this industry. And torsion keys are all very similar. The key is putting it together in a package to provide a suspension system. Okay, that's the key. But since everybody else was selling torsion keys separately, we were selling them separately. Ours happened to be almost half the price of this other one of our competitors that I won't name. And in my copywriting of the product, I sort of called them out, but without calling them out. So I didn't use their name, but I used a phrase that they used and kind of called them out that way, because I don't really like it when businesses try and use jargon that people don't understand to sound important to try and sell something.
Right.
Like, that's just not honest. And I want to be honest. So, if I'm buying this and I can come up with a net profit after a dealer markup, and I'm happy, dealer's happy, customer's happy, that's what we should sell it for. I don't want to be greedy, right? Well, this competitor, he saw what I had. Somebody showed him. And so at SEMA, we're literally setting up at SEMA. And this had to be probably around 2010. So 13 years ago. So he comes up, and he's probably, I'm going to say he's 10 years older than me. And he's got his buddy with him, and big guy. And he comes up and he goes, "Justin, you're ruining the market with these torsion keys." And I said, "I'm ruining the market? What are you talking about? I'm just telling the truth." And he literally called me out, wanted to go outside and fight. I thought that was hilarious. Like he was that upset over some torsion bar keys because his markup was literally, I don't know, 10 times. And my markup was 5 times because I think 5 times is very fair. And I'll say what he said. Oh, you got to have a torsion key in the Z-rated position. I said, what? I've never heard of a torsion key is static. Once this is in your truck, if you're watching YouTube, you'll see this. If you're not, I'm holding the torsion key in my hand. Once this is in the truck and set, it does not move. This is not a dynamic part. Okay, it doesn't move with the suspension.
Rotate with the vehicle.
It literally stays still. So he tried using that crap on me, and I went, "You're a liar." So he then went and tried to call me out and fight me outside, which I declined. I didn't want to get kicked out of SEMA, but I thought that was pretty funny. But I'll tell you, folks,
13 years. I'm surprised you remember.
it was. I do. I remember that because of that instance. And as much as I wanted to poke him in the eye, I did not. I held back. But you've been to SEMA several times with us, and you weren't there at that one. The ones you went to, we had a lot nicer booth, nicer branding, things like that. Back in the day in 2010 and back then, I mean, the budget was tight, really tight. So we did what we could, but hey, we built
that was before social media. That was really before, that was where you got to present all of your new products. That was a lot different time.
Yeah. And some of you may have been wondering, hey, why haven't I seen you at SEMA in the last 4 years? We haven't done SEMA since 2019. And in 2019, this was before COVID crap and all that. I was almost done with SEMA. It has just turned into such an overpriced car show. I like SEMA, the organization. I like what they're about, but the show itself, I just think it's too much.
We're not the only ones.
No, we're not. And so in 2020, I didn't plan on exhibiting. We didn't plan on exhibiting, and they didn't have it because of the COVID thing. And we haven't been back since. We're not going this year either. Who knows?Maybe we'll go back next year. Maybe just something a little smaller. But for the cost, I feel like for the cost that we were putting into SEMA, we can come here, spend money on, say, a podcast, apprise customers, educate dealers, try and be honest, bring knowledge, bring value, help solve problems, things like that. And I think that money will go a lot further than spending it at a show where really it's for dealers only, right? It's a trade show. It's not a public show. So the public really isn't supposed to go to SEMA, although everybody gets badges from somebody they know and they get to go and whatnot. But we're so busy and backed up, it just doesn't make sense to go. So what does make sense is to help solve people's problems via this podcast so that we can get it out there, try and get people educated on topics, help solve their problems, help provide value, help raise standards, right? So that's my torsion key story. Now you all know a little bit more about torsion keys. Hopefully this takes some of the mystique out of the don't crank your torsion keys thing, because it's really not true. These poor little guys didn't do anything. It's not their fault, okay? That's the topic for today, though. We're going to get into a fresh topic next week. And really appreciate, Mallory, you joining and everybody out there watching and listening along.